Welcome to the chapter 12 in the book of Professor Schaffer. It is this topic, the topic of today is imports, customs and tariffs laws. And we are starting now with the dutiable status of goods. But before we start in this lecture, let me give you a quick overview. So the first chapter is about dutiable status of goods. So we're talking about the harmonized commodity description and coding system of the United States, and I will also show you some documents of the EU system. We will talk about the tariff classification of goods, the customs valuation. In the second chapter, we talk about the rules of origin, because this is very important. Sometimes you need a certificate of origin, and it depends on the origin sometimes which customs do you have to pay. So the customs tariffs depends on the origin. We will see some very interesting cases to this. In the third chapter, there's a very interesting case about the other customs who are affecting the US imports, and we will take a look at drawbacks, the system of drawbacks, and the foreign trade zones. In the chapter number 4, we see how the US customs and tariffs law, how they have an administration and that they have a lot of formal things to do. For example, formal entry, liquidation, protest, enforcement, and penalties if you don't follow the rules. Okay, let's start now with a dutiable status of goods. That means zollpflichtiger Status der Waren. But before we start, I will give you a little bit teaching summary. We are talking in this chapter about the customs process. That means when goods cross international borders, they must go through 3 stages. First, you will identify or classify the good and its country of origin. Then you valuing the goods, and then you impose or you collect a tariff, or sometimes you call it tax. All these aspects are harmonized in these days among the WTO members, because we have some WTO conventions, and the most important WTO conventions are the Custom Valuation Code and the GATT agreement. And so the international custom law it's really have a very, very wide and very deep harmonization all over the world. Let's talk about the term classification. What does classification means? Classifications means that you see what is the good as it enters into the country. This will be determined by reference to domestic codes. So EU codes or US codes we will see. The next thing is you have to classify where the good is from, so where it's originated. The country of origin, however, is distinct from the country in which the good most recently resides. Next thing, the value. You have to determine the value, and there we have numerous methods. But the most common method, of course, is the actual price you pay for the good. But if you cannot determine the price or cannot be fairly determined, for instance, where the seller and buyer are related, you can look to the transaction value of identical goods. And okay, once the classification and the value and the country of origin are known, then the tariff can be calculated. Tariff means that you have, for example, a percentage of its value, right? Or per piece, you have then a tariff, and if you want to import this into a country, you have to pay this tariff. This makes, of course, the good gives them the higher price, makes it more pricey, so you don't have the same price as if you sell it in your home country. Good. We have some tariffs, and of course we have restraints on reports, and we have other import controls, and they were applied to goods according always to the item's dutiable status. And you see, classification is very, very important. And in America and also in the EU, we have a harmonized commodity description and coding system. And here you can see this on this internet web page. You can find this US harmonized tariff schedule, HTSUS. And I'm going to show you very quick. You will find it also on Opal. And on this government web page, this is a harmonized tariff schedule from 2020, the revision number 9. You can find here the full document. I gave you on Opal the full document, but if you go down, you will see there are some sections, for example, animals, vegetable products, or prepared foodstuff, mineral products. And each in these areas, you have always some sections. And for example, products of chemical allied industry, plastic articles, of course. This will play a role later in one of our cases. So let's just take a quick view here inside. So this is chapter number 39. So there are lots of chapters and all different types of goods. Okay, and this is the section about plastic and articles therefore. Goods put up in sets consisting of 2 or more separate constituents, some of all which fall in this section and are intended to be mixed together to obtain a product of section number 6 or 7, are to be classified in the heading appropriate to that product, provided the constituents are. So having regard to the manner in which they are popped up, clearly identifiable as being intended to be used together without first being repacked, entered together, and identifiable, whether by the nature or by relative proportions which they are present. Okay, very complicated law, so judicial terms here. Let's go a little bit down. So these are plastical. Some notice here. So what kind of plastic, synthetic rubber, and so on. So these all falls under this. You can see a lot of balconies, balustrades, fencing, right? So this is all under this chapter. And here you can see now the tariff. The tariff here is, for example, 6.5% in general. And so we will have an import tariff on these polymer in some forms. But sometimes you have something special. And this is very important. So it's free from this country, right? And yeah, so this is one example of a schedule, a custom schedule. Good. So the most common method to make a tariff classification is, of course, the ad valorem tariff. So this is a percentage of the value of the articles imported. You have seen this, 6.5. Sometimes you have a specific tariff rate. This is sometimes a dollar amount per piece or per unit or of weight or measure. And sometimes you have a compound tariff, combination of both valorem and specific rates. And we have several ways how to describe the tariff, to describe the articles. Sometimes they have a name, sometimes they have a physical characteristics, sometimes they have some components, or sometimes the schedules, they talk about the use. Yeah, and in this first case about auto products, the cases or the goods they have to classify are cases for smartphones. And they were branded as the OtterBox, Commuter, or Defender. And these products, they do really exist. If you look them up here on the internet, here Otterbox. So we're talking about these smartphone cases, and of course they have a plastic screen, rigid outer plastic shell that fits snugly, and a flexible silicone component. And you have to now to classify this, and we have, for example, the chapter 49, and there we have here a number. We just show you again. So this was not ours. 14. What was it? What was it again? 49 here. He printed book, need pictures. No, that was it. Wasn't it not? Let's just see again. Okay, wait. It's 42. Okay. 42. Here. Articles of leather, saddlery and harms, travel goods, handbags and similar containers. So you can see, is this a handbag or is this a similar container, for example, right? So yeah, you can see it here: trunks, suitcases, vanity cases, attaché, briefcases, and similar containers at 20% duty. So they have this high percentage. Or in the chapter 39, other articles of plastic, they have only 5.3% duty. So much less than in the other tariff classification. Of course, they were arguing which one is the right chapter, the right classification. Yeah, we will see this, we will talk about this then later. And you can see they really have a lot of problems and they have to consider a lot of things here. And one thing is very important: if you see that you pay a lot more tariff if you import these products, it has a lot of effect for the new product design, right? Because clever manufacturers will check before they design a product to see what tariff applies to similar products, and then they try to design a product that will be placed in the lowest possible classification with the lowest rate, right? For example, we have here an example. How would you see this case affecting classification of other items? How would you classify a smart cover for a tablet? Would it make difference if the tablet cover has a zipper or not, right? So the zipper maybe opens another classification with at least a higher classification with a higher rate. Sometimes we have a classification by use. I already mentioned this. And an example is a detergent additive for gasoline. And it's so it can be described as a preparation used to keep the carburetor clean, right? So sometimes the classification is looking, and for what use can you use this good? And here this article has several different uses. And if you have different uses, so the principal use controls is important for the classification, right? But also an article can classify it by to its actual use. And we have here a microscope in this case of Carl Zeiss, and so they had here really suing. They were they had a really argument here about under where should be classified this microscope. They said stereoscopic compound microscope, or what did they say? Instruments and appliance used in medical surgery, right? So this is a little bit about what it can be a microscope, or it can also be an instrument. So they filed here a protest. And at the end, you can see what sources does a court really look up to determine the common or the commercial meanings and the use, right? if you interpret these custom rules, there are some rules of interpretation. So we have the rule of relative specificity. So that means you must always classify a good under the one that most specifically, most narrowly describes the article with the greatest degree of accuracy and certainty. Or if it has some other characters, so you have to classify by the essential character, right? So the article must be classified under the heading that describes the material or components that give the article its essential character. And in this case, Better Home Plastic, we had a shower liner, and so we had to find out if the shower liner if the shower liner is more a shower liner from to plastic things or to a curtain. And so that is very important for you as a business as manager. An importer is free to engineer his product in order to take advantage of some tariff laws, right? So this is very important. And if you import something, the custom value must be reported at the time of entry. And from this value, of course, then you calculate the tariff. And the dutiable value equals transaction value, of course, then the actual price, packing cost, some commission, some value of an assist, and proceeds of any resale that accrues to buyer. And you get all these from the commercial invoice, right? And then you put some duties on it, but you don't pay any duty on freight and marine insurance. Okay, that was all about the dutiable status of good. In the next chapter, we will take a look at the rules of origin. Why? You will see this very soon, because the rule of origin is very important, because we saw here in the schedule that sometimes it's free, right? You don't have to pay any duty, no custom, nothing, because it comes from these countries, and that's why you need to know the origin of the good.